Thank you very much, Clive. I'm just going to share my screen. Right, so hopefully you can see that. And I'll put it on slideshow in a moment. So I'd just like to start by saying how delighted I am to be with the IOSH South Midlands branch this evening, and a big thank you to Scott and Paul and Clive and the rest of the gang for making this happen. Thank you very much. By way of introduction, I'm first and foremost a safety practitioner. I have been since 1988, which means I remember health and safety before HSG 65, believe it or not. And up until quite recently, 2012, I would have described myself as a traditional sort of systems-led OSH practitioner. So HSG 65, OSHS 18001, you know, familiar with all of those things, and then obviously more recently ISO 45001. But what happened in 2012 was that I discovered, quite by accident really, I discovered what real coaching skills were about. Having had a belief that coaching was this particular thing, I attended a coaching course and was put right and discovered that actually what I thought was coaching isn't coaching, and actually real coaching is profoundly more important to me as a safety practitioner than I ever would have given it credit for. So that sort of changed things, you know, fundamentally for me, and took my career into quite an unexpected direction. So if we can just put the slides onto slideshow. What I'd like to talk with you about this evening is this. So we'll talk about what is coaching and what the attributes of a good coach are. Then I'd like to show you what I call the coaching practitioner model, which shows how coaching skills can be incorporated within the daily practice of an OSH practitioner. And then I'd like to finish off by talking about, you know, if you wanted to develop a coaching style, if you wanted to develop a coaching approach, how you go about making the transition. So I'll share a few thoughts with you on that. Well, first of all, what is coaching? So I'd ask you this question, you know, where do your ideas and where do your insights come from? How do you get your ideas? How do you get your insights? So I think we've probably all had the experience of an idea or a thought coming to us in a sort of eureka type moment. So we've got a problem that's troubling us, it's been troubling us for a while. We've got a dilemma about which way to go. And, you know, all of a sudden, seemingly from nowhere, and we might not even be thinking about it at this particular time, we might be out walking the dog or doing something quite different, but out of nowhere, the way forward jumps into our mind in that kind of eureka type moment. So that's quite rare when that happens, but I think we've all had those eureka type moments occasionally. Or an idea might come to you, you might be having lunch, say, with a colleague or with a friend, and you're chatting through this problem that's been on your mind. Now, in reality, your colleague or your friend isn't really taking part in the conversation. Truth is, they might not even be listening. You know, they might actually be away thinking about something else. But there's just something about that talking through something that allows that idea and that insight to come to you. So again, ping, from nowhere almost, the way forward reveals itself to you. So those two examples, they're quite passive things. You know, the idea might come or it might not. Now imagine talking through that problem or that dilemma with somebody who is trained not just to listen, but to listen really, really well, and to ask really probing questions that drives your exploration of this issue that's on your mind. So that person is a coach. That person is supporting your exploration, your investigation of this problem. And that changes the whole thing from a passive thing into an active thing, because there's an active pursuit then of the idea, of the insight, of the way forward. So that's kind of what coaching is. It's a very active rather than passive thing. So this is my favorite definition of a coach. It's by Janice Kaplan, who is a coach and a published author. And she says that a coach is a collaborative partner who works with the learner to help them achieve goals, solve problems, learn and develop. Now that's my favorite definition of a coach, because actually I think that's a pretty bloody good definition of a safety practitioner too. Now you might want to tinker around with some of the words. You might not like the word learner. You might want to see health and safety in there somewhere. But for me, even as it stands, that's a pretty good definition of an OSH professional, because that's what I aspire to be and that's what I aspire to do. And frankly, I think we all as professionals, health and safety professionals, should be aspiring to be that and to do that. So for me, that's a really good definition of a coach. In terms of attributes of a good coach, so most coaches will use what's called a coaching model. So what is a coaching model? Coaches use models, coaching models, to help them facilitate conversations and to help them deploy their coaching skills. Now, the world is full of coaching models, but easily the most commonly used coaching model on the planet is the GROW model. So if you were to Google coaching, you wouldn't have to look very far until you come across GROW. In the coaching world, it's ubiquitous, it's everywhere. It's used by coaches all over the world, organizations all over the world. For most coaches, it's the model that they're introduced to first. And for many coaches, it's enough. It's sufficient as a GROW, as a coaching model. It does the job. Now it's a bit beyond the scope of this presentation to delve too much into the GROW model, but you can Google that and read up on that at your leisure. So most coaches will use some kind of coaching model, and the GROW model is easily the most commonly used model that there is. But these are some attributes of a good coach. So a good coach will be a really good active listener. So what is active listening? Well, this is how I've come to understand it, okay? So I'm going to go quiet for a few seconds, 15 or 20 seconds. And during this period of quietness, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to notice all of the things that you can hear. So there might be things in the room that you're in that you can hear. There might be things that are outside the room that you're in, but still in the building that you can hear them. Or there might be things from outside the building even that you can hear. But in this period of silence, 15 or 20 seconds, just make a mental note of the things that you can actually hear when I go quiet now. Right, so I obviously can't hear what you can hear in your building, but what I can hear is I've got a fire lit down here, so I can hear the crackle of the fire. I can hear the motor on my laptop, which has always seemed quite loud to me, but I can hear that. There are some bushes outside those windows behind me, and it's quite windy where I am today, so I can hear those bushes. I can hear those bushes swaying, and I've got a couple of dogs in the house, and one just climbed up the stairs, and I could hear him padding up the stairs. So the thing is, there are sounds that you can hear, but you're not listening to them. And had I not asked you to focus on those things, you probably wouldn't have noticed them at all. But I asked you to listen out for them, and then you noticed them. So there are sounds that you can hear that you're not listening to. And even in the quietest rooms, there are things that you can hear that you're not listening to. So in the moment that we are born, because we don't know any better, all sounds have equal value. But very quickly as humans, we develop this faculty of zoning some things in and zoning some things out according to what we're interested in or what's important to us in any particular moment in time. And very quickly, we develop that faculty. Now, that's a passive way of listening, because for the most part, day in, day out, 24 hours a day, we are zoning some things in and we are zoning some things out according to what we're interested in, without any consciousness of doing it. It's just how we operate as humans. We are passively zoning things in and zoning things out without a great deal of choice or consciousness about it. So for me, in active listening, the key word is the active, because when you're a good active listener, you make a conscious decision to focus all of your attention on the other person and what they're saying and what they're communicating, verbally and non-verbally, for that period of time. And when you study active listening and when you practice active listening, you soon become aware that there is so much going on in terms of verbal and non-verbal communication. You couldn't possibly actively listen all of the time with that level of concentration. It'd drive you nuts to even try it. So it's an active thing. You turn it on when you decide that you're going to concentrate to that degree. And then when you finish that exercise, whatever that exercise is, be it a coaching conversation or whatever, then it gets switched off and you resort then to passive listening. So active listening, the key word is active. It's that conscious decision to focus all of your attention on what is being communicated, both verbally and non-verbally. And in class, we talk about the importance of gestures. Hand gestures, very important. The use of metaphors is really important. And we talk about expressions as well. So active listening, it's a very deep, very focused level of listening, but the key word is active. It's a choice. You turn it on and then it gets turned off again. A good coach is a good active listener. A good coach facilitates or drives a conversation by asking great questions. So when I was at school, I was taught that questions begin with these words. So I'm not sure whether you can see that. The questions, when I was at school, I was taught that they begin with these words: who, what, where, when, why. Open questions begin with those words. You know, by the laws of English grammar, it's impossible to answer a question that begins with one of those words with a simple yes or no answer. It simply can't be done. So what's another way of looking at that? Yes, it doesn't work. Or how could we do this differently? No, it doesn't work. So in coaching, open questions are the order of the day. It's open questions that drive that exploration from the coachee. Open questions begin with those words. The reason why I've circled why there is because for coaches, why is a problematic word. Now, I understand that in a room full of safety practitioners, you know, there's a risk that I might be regarded as a bit of a heretic here by suggesting this, but why really isn't the most useful question in the toolbox. I know that many safety practitioners believe that it is. So let me try and illustrate to you the reason why it is that why is such a problematic question. So think about your experience of asking why questions. So I guess a lot of your experience has come through root cause analysis, something like 5 whys technique. So let's just think about 5 whys technique to try and understand what happens when you ask why questions. So 5 whys technique goes something like this, doesn't it? So there's been an event, an accident or a dangerous occurrence, and you've collected all of your data, and then you say, okay, then why did this happen? Well, this happened because this happened. So why did that thing happen? That happened because these 2 things happened. Okay, and why did that one thing there happen? That happened because these 3 things happened. And that other thing over there, why did that happen? That happened because these 2 things happened. And on it goes, doesn't it? Until you arrive at those root causes. And the theory is that if you can address those root causes, then not only do you stop this event from happening again, but you stop other similar events happening again because they have common root causes. So don't get me wrong, I'm a safety practitioner. I've been for over 30 years. If I'm investigating an accident or a dangerous occurrence, I'll use 5 whys technique, and I will out why anybody in the room when I'm investigating an accident or a dangerous occurrence. But when I'm coaching, I don't necessarily want to ask why, because what's going on here through asking why? Isn't it the case that what's going on here is that we're moving backwards? Isn't it? Isn't it the case that we're getting into increased levels of complexity? Aren't we? We start off with a fairly simple event, person falls from ladder. Before very long, we've got quite a complicated, convoluted picture of cause and effect. So do I want that when I'm coaching? And isn't it also the case, and your experience will tell you this, that some of those paths that we're led down, they kind of become a bit problematic, don't they? Because they're associated with things like judgments and decision-making and discipline. And so they become a bit awkward, don't they? The conversations when you led down those sorts of paths. So again, I say, don't get me wrong, I'm a safety practitioner. If I'm investigating an accident, I'll use 5 whys technique. But when I'm coaching, I don't want to go backwards. I want to support my colleague to move forwards towards a solution. When I'm coaching, I don't want to get into increased levels of complexity, particularly if I can't engage with that complexity. And I certainly don't want to be led down paths that become awkward because they're associated with judgments and decision-making, etc. I don't want any of those things when I'm coaching. So don't get me wrong, I'm not outlawing the why question. It has its place, but it's not the most solutions-focused question in the toolbox. And coaches do hesitate before asking the why question. Coaching is solutions-focused. By its very nature, it just is. And the why question is not the most solutions-focused question that you can ask. Now, being solutions-focused, again, it's a bit beyond the sort of remit of this presentation. But it means more than just having a desire to find solutions. People will say, oh, Michael Emery, he's really solutions-focused, meaning that he's always after a solution, that he's got a tendency to come up with innovative and imaginative solutions. That's not what solutions-focused means in the coaching world. Being solutions-focused in the coaching world means using solutions-focused techniques to gather information about the solution rather than gathering information about the problem, which is what you just saw through that illustration with 5 whys technique. So you could Google things like the miracle question, but there are coaching techniques that avoid the need to dissect the problem, almost as if the problem doesn't exist. There are techniques to keep you focused on the solution and finding out as much as possible about the solution with a view to building the solution. So being solutions focused is about solutions building rather than problem solving, which sounds like a bit of a clever sort of play on words, but it's profoundly more than that. So coaching is solutions focused, and coaches know when and how to be person centered. So again, person centered, you know, it doesn't mean what the man in the street would think it would mean. So to a lot of people, being person centered would mean that, you know, Michael's really person centered, meaning that he's really caring, and he's got a great care about people and what people think and people's welfare, etc., etc. In the coaching world, being person centered doesn't mean that. And I'll just give you a quick illustration of what being person centered does mean. So I don't know whether you can see on the screen, but I've got a bottle here, and this contains a hazardous substance. Okay, so imagine that somebody from your workplace, so a supervisor, say, pops into your office or stops you in the corridor and says, I'd like to use this hazardous substance. So you're the safety practitioner. You know, what questions are you going to ask that supervisor faced with that question? I'd like to use this hazardous substance. So what questions are you going to ask that supervisor? Just think for a moment about the questions that you're going to ask him or her. Now, obviously, I can't have you all shouting out, but I would bet money that for many of you listening to this, the sort of questions that are going through your mind, sort of questions that you might think about asking that supervisor would be things like this. What is it? What is it that's in that bottle? You know, how are you going to use it? Where are you going to use it? What are you going to use it for? So if those are the sorts of questions that are running through your mind that you might ask that supervisor, you know, that's exactly the line of questioning that I get coming back to me in class. Now, I would just ask you to think about, through that line of questioning, what is it? What are you going to use it for? Where are you going to use it? How much of it are you going to use? How are you going to use it? Through that line of questioning, where is your focus? Your focus, I would suggest, is on the substance. Okay? Now, here's a different line of questioning. What do you know about it? Where could you find out more? What is that information telling you? How does that translate to your situation? What does that suggest you might need to do? So through that line of questioning, where is my focus? My focus isn't on the substance. My focus is on the person. And that's what being person-centered means. In the coaching world, and this is a line of questioning and a line of thinking that is borrowed from counseling, person-centered counseling. In the coaching world, being person-centered means following a line of questions that focuses on what the person knows, what the person has understood, and what the person has experienced. That's what being person-centered means to a coach. But these are some of the key, I mean, there are others, but these are some of the key attributes of a good coach. A good coach is a really good active listener. A good coach asks great questions. And we mentioned something there about the reluctance that coaches have around the why question, because it comes with a bit of baggage. Good coaches are solutions focused, and they're aware of solutions focused coaching techniques. And a good coach knows when and how to be person centered. So knows when and how to tap into what their colleague or what their client knows and understands and has experienced. So this is the CIPD definition of coaching and mentoring. And I'm just going to give you a few seconds to read through that while I have a drink of this hazardous substance. So I hope I've allowed enough time for you to read that. But this is where my understanding of what became the coaching practitioner model started. You know, I believe that the very best OSH practitioners are a hybrid almost of those two things, a coach and a mentor. Now, on the mentoring side, you know, we're quite strong because as safety professionals, you know, we know about the law, we know about the standards that need to be achieved. You know, those of us that have been around for a while, we've experience of how other organizations have solved problems and tackled things. And all of this is the greater knowledge and understanding that we bring to a conversation, and we are prized for that. In many organizations, we're the only people that know that kind of stuff, and we're prized for that. But in those situations where we don't have that knowledge to contribute, and I'll give you an illustration of this in a moment, then beyond that, our reputation says we don't have a great deal to offer. You know, when we can't rely upon our knowledge of the law and the standards that need to be achieved, you know, we don't really have a great deal else to offer, is what our reputation often says. So that coaching side is a really important side, because it's that coaching side that helps us to provide a service to our colleagues and our clients, even when we can't engage at a technical level. So I believe that the very best practitioners are a combination of those two things. So let me just show you a couple of slides to try and illustrate what I mean by this. So there are some conversations, I mean, this is a conversation between you and them, whoever they are, okay, whoever them is. So you have your knowledge, you have your experience, you have your understanding, but they, and it could be a colleague in your organization, it could be a client, they have their knowledge, they have their experience, and they have their understanding. Now, there are some conversations, I actually think they're quite rare, but there are some conversations where all that's required from you is for you to share what you know. So a silly example, you know, somebody, supervisor, pops their head into your office or rings you up and says, how high should a guardrail be? Now, you don't coach the answer from them, you just tell them. So top guardrail between 900 and 1100 millimeters, intermediate guardrail, 450 millimeters. Oh, and don't forget the toe board, that's 150 millimeters. Have a nice day, and off they go. Now, in that kind of a conversation, which I think is quite rare, that could be illustrated like this, where it's you as the practitioner that is dominating. All that's required from you is that you share what you know. I think those conversations are quite rare. Now, as a freelancer, and there might be other freelancers in the room, I recognize this situation to be a lot more common. So there are some conversations where you have very little technical knowledge and experience and understanding to contribute. So you have very little to share. So let me give you an example. So this is true. So I think it was probably sometime in 2018. I was supporting 3 different clients, okay? And in the space of 1 week, I could visit these 3 different clients. So I was supporting a Spanish biscuit manufacturer who was setting up in the east of England, new factory, and they made classic biscuits, so custard creams, bourbons, those kind of biscuits, okay? And in the same week, I could visit another client in Shropshire who reclaim aluminium from furnace slag. So their raw material is the lining of furnaces. And the process here is, I mean, this is a vision of hell, this place. It's the dirtiest, dustiest, noisiest, darkest, horriblest process you can imagine. And in the same week, I could be visiting another client in Leeds who make heart valves from pig skin in a clean room environment. So I ask you, you know, where am I going to get technical knowledge from in terms of making biscuits, reclaiming aluminium from furnace slag, and making heart valves from pigskin? I know so little at a technical level on those three processes. I have very little to share. So in those situations, it's the coach in me that dominates, because I have very little technical knowledge or experience to contribute. So it's the coach in me that is providing the service in those situations. Now, a mistake that I was making at the beginning of my coaching journey was I was making the mistake of thinking I had to decide at the beginning of a conversation which I was going to be. Am I going to be a practitioner in this conversation, or am I going to be a coach in this conversation? And it was with the help of my coach that I come to realize that actually it's not as cut and dried as that. It's not as black and white as that. And actually, most conversations can be characterized like this. There are moments in this conversation where I have to share something. My knowledge of standards, my knowledge of the law, my experience of what other organizations have done. But then having done that sharing, I might want to tap into what Vincent can contribute in this moment, because he's got valuable experience to contribute. And then in the next moment, I might want to tap into what Clive wants to say on this, because it's important that we get Clive's contribution. And then in the next moment, it might be back to me sharing something that I know or have experienced. So as a coaching practitioner, the way that you can utilize coaching skills in your daily practice is that you almost become like the conductor of an orchestra, where you're facilitating conversations using your coaching techniques, tapping into what others know and understand and have experienced, as well as sharing the valuable information that you know and can share. So that's the way I see it. Obviously, you have to develop the coaching skills to be able to deploy them in the first place, but that's how I've come to understand how you use coaching skills in my daily practice as a safety practitioner. And I hope that's helped you to understand that too. That was a real breakthrough for me. So in terms of making the transition, so I'd just like to share some things from my journey, which I've found to be important in terms of my development of coaching skills to complement the technical knowledge that I've acquired through NEBOSH courses and all the other technical courses that I've attended over the years. These are some of the things that have been valuable to me. I mean, clearly, we're talking about skills here. So, like with any other skill, be it diving, my son's a keen diver, be it football skills, whatever it is, as a skill, you've got to invest your time. So you've got to learn about coaching skills in the first place, and you've got to practice, because this is a skills thing rather than a knowledge thing. So, I mean, I have a coaching course, obviously, but the world is full of coaching courses. And the reality is, you know, your local college will probably be providing ILM coaching courses. Most local colleges do. So you've got to, you know, you can read books, of course, and there are some good books out there, but it's a skill. So it's a skill that you've got to learn to deploy, and then you've got to practice it. So you've got to attend a coaching course in my world. That's what you have to do. I've found great value in having a coach. I have a coach, her name is Julia. She's been an executive coach for 25 odd years, and she's been my coach since about 2013, something like that. And I found great value in being coached, and I've learned such a lot about coaching through being coached by Julia. So I would certainly recommend that. Find a role model to emulate. Now, the reason why I have this on my list is because when I learned what real coaching skills were, I then recognized that a chap called David, who worked at one of the clients that I spent time with, I learned that actually what he did was coach. And everybody admired David. You know, nobody had a bad word to say about him. And I had a particular rapport with him, and I used to love spending time talking with him. And but it was only when I discovered what real coaching skills were that I realized that he was a bloody good coach. So if you can find somebody who is a bloody good coach to emulate, then that's going to help you no end, because you do what they do. And these are some of the things that a really good coach will do. So they'll talk less, and they'll listen more, and they'll listen better. So they'll learn about active listening, and they'll practice active listening. Active listening is a conscious choice. They'll tell less, they'll question more, and they'll question better. And questioning better often means being person-centered. So following a person-centered line of questioning, which means tapping into the resources of others. So tapping into what your colleagues and or your clients know and understand and have experienced. Now, many organizations, and I'd bet money that your organization says this too, many organizations say that their people are their most valuable resource. But precious few organizations provide the skills to enable their managers, their supervisors, and others to tap into that resource. So what that means is, if your organization isn't providing the skills to enable you to tap into that resource, that means that resource is lying dormant and underutilized. And that's a great shame. So if your organization is one that says that its people are its most valuable resource, then you should ask the question, is my organization providing me the skills to be able to tap into that resource? And be solutions focused. So learn about solutions focused coaching techniques. I've mentioned one earlier. Learn about it, practice it. They're really valuable, and it's a real paradigm shift in terms of an approach. So those are my thoughts based upon my experience of how I've developed my coaching skills. I've just got a couple of things to mention. I put my email address on the screen there, and the reason why I've done that is that I have a couple of free resources that you can obtain off me if you drop me a line at that email address. So one resource I have is a publication which is called Be Brilliant, the Coaching Practitioner Model, which covers what we've talked about this evening, but in greater depth. I have another publication which is called Culture Building, an Introductory Guide. So most coaching is normally referred to in terms of one-to-one conversations. But in the last couple of years or so, I've been developing thoughts and developing an approach using coaching skills at a more macro level to help in culture change. So I have a publication called Culture Building, an Introductory Guide, and I have a new initiative which we call Thrive, which is about using coaching skills at a macro level to assist with culture change. And we have a couple of Thrive implementations on the go at the moment. We've got great interest in this for early next year. And I'm really excited about this for next year. So I have a very brief publication outlining what Thrive is all about. And what I'm trying to do is to find the time to put some case study material together from the implementations that we're working through at the moment. So I also have a brief publication about Thrive which is a culture building implementation. So I think that's it, except for this. So on the CIPD website, I haven't looked recently, but there used to be a podcast called Coaching, It's a Culture Thing. I hope it's still there because it's a great podcast. And this quote is from there, where it says that coaching is not new, but its place in the workplace is evolving. Increasingly, organizations aspire to have a culture in which managers and others are able to have live, in the moment, collaborative conversations as a means of solving problems and driving performance. So that's how I see coaching in the modern world. And that's what I find really exciting, and that's what I'm really interested in this moment in time. And I do believe that's the last slide. So I hope that's been useful to you. I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Very interesting. I think we can all relate to some of what you've said. Certainly my experience when I started out was very much along the lines of telling people what to do, but maybe it's age, maybe it was coming up against in the main originally academics who were very stubborn to implement, if you like, health and safety law. You learn to work with people, and one of the things which I always said to my team was talk to managers about options, because the bottom line is we do what's reasonably practicable, and that really is a case of tapping into what resources the managers have available to them. It's not about following the law absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, very, very interesting. I don't know if anyone would like to, if you like, unmute and ask questions, but there's certainly a paucity of questions on the chat box. But I think one of the things which I'd like to ask a little bit more about is what you finished off with, leaders and managers actually adopting coaching practices. I must admit I haven't experienced a great deal of that. It tends to be one-way conversations with a lot of managers to their staff, maybe because there was pressure to just get things done. So there wasn't time for the manager to, if you like, understand their staff fully. Is that something you've come across?
Well, David, my role model, was a senior production manager in the organisation that I was working with at the time, and that organisation aspired to have a coaching culture. And so that organisation put all of its managers and supervisors through coaching course. And it was that course that I attended that blew my mind and turned me on to actually what real coaching was about. So I think there are organisations out there, Clive, that aspire to have coaching cultures and will put their managers onto coaching courses. But I repeat what I said during the presentation. It's a skill, and it's a skill that needs to be practiced. So certainly attending the course can be an important stepping stone in your development, but then you have to make a conscious effort to practice. And in class, I share a number of ideas with my delegates and the sort of things that they can do immediately leaving the class to start to practice. So I go through some of the opportunities that they can look out for when coaching will arise, coaching opportunities will arise. And I see it as part of my duty in class to help them understand what they need to do to develop that coaching style. Because for me, it's very much about developing a coaching style. You know, I mean, people who know me now and who knew me in 2012 will know that my style has changed considerably through the habitual use of coaching skills, and that's really what I'm about, is helping people to develop the skills to complement their technical knowledge.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a few questions coming in now. Is there any difference between coaching and teaching in safety? And what is the difference between training and coaching? And can employee coaching improve safety culture? All linked questions.
Well, absolutely, yes. There is a difference between coaching and training. And I don't have time to go into it now, but I could provide an argument that says that actually they're diametrically opposed to each other. So a lot of delegates turn up in class thinking that coaching and training are sort of like buddies, and that coaching is a sort of practical, arm around the shoulder, supportive type of training. It isn't. That's really important, but that's training. Coaching is fundamentally different. So yes, that's the first question. And the second question about culture, absolutely. You know, I think if you ask most organizations what kind of culture they wanted, they'd say a collaborative culture. Well, coaching equals collaboration. If I was to define coaching in a single word, it's collaboration. So I think that having enough people around who are good at coaching absolutely helps culture change. I describe coaches as the earthworms of culture change, because they provide they provide the environment and the circumstances that enable cultures to develop and thrive. So yes.
Thank you. We have a question from Christine.
Hello, everybody. It's really a couple of comments. After I did my qualification with Michael, it changed my whole approach to working with clients or delivering training, including IOSH programs. And whereas I've been banging my head against a brick wall for many years, a lot of my clients, small construction companies or engineering, and just found that by adopting a coaching approach, it just delivered more results, more shifts in attitude, and got stuff done. The other thing to say, perhaps a little bit around the question's difference between teaching and coaching. A lot of the coaching I do now, separate from health and safety, is around apprenticeships. So whether that's IT techies at Aston or level 5 ILM management people, the coaching is a legal or framework requirement in any apprenticeship. And sometimes if they're very techie, then they just don't get it. But it is about a holistic worker. It's what employers want. They're buying the skills, the technical knowledge, know-how, output, productivity, but a committed, engaged worker is far more valuable to a business than somebody who turns up just for the paycheck. And it is this vehicle of coaching combined with all the other skills that we have, and including training and didactic teaching, that combined will move an organization forward. So initially, and Michael probably remembers it, on day one of the course, I was a bit skeptical about the application of coaching in what I considered at that time to be a very hard-nosed, regulation compliance governed sector to work in, and how you actually put solutions in place when the question is how high is the guardrail supposed to be. There's a wealth of difference between the telling and the engagement approach of coaching. So I just wanted to say, never looked back, and it's just benefited my approach to all work. It gets results.
I remember it very well, Christine, and it's lovely to share. It's lovely to share the room with you again. Ish.
Great. Okay. Well, we don't seem to have any more questions, so I think it's just up to me to say thank you very much, Michael. That was a very enlightening presentation. I hope I certainly enjoyed it, and I hope everybody else did. I think it gives us pause for thought to when we next approach or are approached by people who have a health and safety problem. So thank you again.
You're very welcome. Delighted to have been here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
And thank you.
You're welcome.
And thank you, everybody. Scott, when's our next presentation?
So our next event is the 26th of January by Gareth Salisbury from Drug Wipe. We then have an event in February, 16th of February, which is Lawrence Webb, President-elect of IOSH. That's going to be something on the competency framework around about strategy, leadership and management.
Excellent. Thank you, Scott. So thank you, everyone. And we will hope to see you at the next meetings. Thank you.
Cheerio. Thank you all.